beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of a Nanny's Life podcast. My name is Amber Noel. Thank you for being here. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And while it is not May when you are listening to this, it was May when we recorded this. So just keep that in mind. This week, I'm really excited to talk to a friend in the industry who actually proposed this topic to me. I was going to skip it this year, y'all. I'm not going to hold you because it's been a little heavy. It's been a lot. But the truth is, we got to talk about things as we're going through them in order to be as authentic as possible. So we're going to chat about it today. My guest today is a fellow yapper. We are probably going to talk forever, and I'm very excited about it, y'all. Let's welcome Surra to the potty. Hey, friend. How you doing?
Good morning, babe. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm excited it's Saturday. I get a second 3-day weekend. So yeah, and I'm so hyped to talk to you. I have not seen you in
Me
forever.
too. Me too. This was like I literally woke up so excited for this morning. So excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So, sir, before we dive into the topic at hand, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself to the folks in case they're not familiar?
I would love to. If you're not familiar, I'm going to be really sad, but I'll still introduce myself to you anyways. My name is Surra. I am a professional nanny of almost 20 years now. I used to be a kindergarten teacher, and for many reasons, which I'm sure a lot of us don't need listed, it just did not feel right for me. And a very long story short, I was living in New York City at the time. I had a friend who was working as a placement coordinator for a nanny agency. She was like, "Hey, why don't you come in and try this?" And I was like, "Wait, nannying? Like, I thought that was just something I did in high school and college. Like, that's not something I can do for life." And she was like, "No, no, come on in and interview." And I never turned back. And it has honestly been the absolute highlight of my professional career to be in this industry. And I'm just so excited to be here and talk about things that are important to you and I personally, to a lot of people in our industry, and just have some fun this morning.
Yeah, I'm so hyped to talk to you. Do you remember Palooza 22?
I remember Palooza 22. I remember chilling out on like what are those like porch swings, just hanging out. We were chatting it up. How can I forget?
Sir gave me the best hug, y'all. Just ran up to
No,
me and
you
was
gave
like,
the best
"You're
hug.
gonna love me."
You gave the best hug. I received the best hug is what actually happened. I
What's
received
funny
the best
is
hug.
I was legitimately mid meltdown. I was in the middle of a mentee bee, and Sir was like, "Hey, y'all."
I
So we
literally was
slipped
just like,
out of it.
"Hey, sorry." Like I could tell that you guys were mid conversation. Clearly, I didn't know it was like mid crash out, but I knew something was like just conversing. But I was just like, I cannot miss my chance. I've tried pulling you aside multiple times because it was our first time finally meeting in real life. And I was like, "I'm sorry. Like, I've tried. Like, Amber, get over here. I need that hug."
It was the best. No, it was perfect timing. I needed that. I needed to come back to earth and ground it out.
Isn't it funny though how things happen like that where you can just be in one of like those horrible, horrible moments and something so simple like that is like, wow, all right, whatever that was is gone and let's move into this peaceful, funny space instead.
Yeah, it was so helpful. And it's so funny that now, like 3 years later, almost, we're talking about mental health awareness because I feel like I underestimated the demand, I think, for my mental health in this industry in general, in the work that we do, in networking with one another, and moving through society. Like, it really takes a very grounded individual to do this well and for the long term. So I can't wait to dive into the topic because
We got a
I
lot.
feel
We got
like
a lot to discuss.
we do. I feel like there's such a stigma around mental health in our industry. And
Still.
particularly, yeah, and particularly in comparison to parents. I find it fascinating that, obviously, listen, moms are magic. Moms create babies, they birth babies, the hormones be hormoning. And I think we finally gotten to a place as a society where we acknowledge that, like, your mind changes and things are difficult and things can get heavy sometimes, and it's not just about what you can do but sometimes where you are mentally. For parents, we haven't gotten there for caregivers yet. I don't know. What's your experience with that, Sarah?
No, I think you're completely hitting the nail on the head there. And I feel like it's because people undervalue the role of the caregiver in every capacity. And I don't mean just for our industry, any type of caregiver, even like a nurse, a senior health aide, anyone who is providing some type of physical care like that, I feel like does not get the same grace and leniency that someone like a parent does. And we're never going to sit here and take away, like you said, the importance of the parent. They are always, first and foremost, that top tier line for those children. However, for our industry, we come in and very often are those primary caregivers for those children, yet are not given the same understanding and grace and leniency because they didn't come out of my birth canal. Like let's be honest, birthing a child, I'm sorry, like it might sound a little intense. Birthing a child does not give someone an automatic understanding of how to do this. And yet we come in and offer that support and that guidance and aren't always met with the same understanding and respect.
Absolutely. And even considering that people in this world sometimes have mental health challenges before becoming parents, right? And they get to talk through that with their therapist if they have one, adjust their meds if they need to, navigate pregnancy. And then people are so sensitive to their needs, I feel like in general, not in every case, once they have the child, but we don't consider caregivers who may have mental health challenges. I mean, I'm talking as basic as what does your cup say, sir? Anxiety. Like,
Got it. Girl, I got no problem. I have a whole slew of alphabet letters in my diagnoses, and I have no problem talking about it because, like you said, mental health overall is still stigmatized. It is 2025. There is no shame. There should be nothing taboo about talking about the fact that I have anxiety. I have ADHD. I have PMDD. My cup happily says fueled by coffee and anxiety. It is okay to say out loud that we have different types of struggles because you know what? Almost everybody does. Neurodivergence is a humongous spectrum, and you would be surprised how many people are on it.
an important thing to consider as well, right? Is what it takes to do this work, what it takes to want to do this work, and what it takes to do it well. And I am of the belief that, like you said, more people have mental health struggles than don't. Like, it's just, we don't talk about it in our industry because we want to present as like balanced and grounded and zen and I'm always going to be happy. That's not realistic. I'm always going to be calm. I mean, we try, like I'm always going to see the silver lining. I'm always going to find the positive. I'm always going to it's like that's not the world we live in. But also I think individuals with anxiety, especially if you have it to a point where you understand what's going on in your brain and how to work around that. Individuals with ADHD, I feel like are better caregivers personally because we're thinking about all the things that could go wrong. We're thinking about all the different possibilities to end our day, like if I start off doing this, okay, this might happen, this. We're more careful, we're more considerate of everything that's going on around us. We're more sensitive and keen to other people's feelings. And with the ADHD, like that's nanny life. You got to be able to think about the cookies that are baking, but also the child that's in the playroom, and also the contractor who's knocking on the door, and also the parents who may come home at any time, and also the grandparent who really wants to visit but doesn't want to drive. Like all those things we juggle. How would I do that if my brain did not work best with 700 tabs open? How?
Two things that you said really resonated with me that I want to touch on before I forget. The first one was that, you mentioned something about how we don't always want people to know what our personal struggles are, especially our employers. Um, Legally, obviously, no one is allowed to ask, what type of conditions you have. And, depending on your relationship with your employers, you might want to share that or not. But overall, most people don't feel comfortable discussing things like that with their employers. Unfortunately, like we said already, there is still a stigma around mental health. And so you might be concerned or scared that if your employers know you have a mental health struggle, that they would judge you or think that you might not be able to do your job to your best of your ability. Right. And I vividly remember one day at work, I have a little pill case, obviously, because I need to take all of my meds. And I left it at work one day. And my first reaction, even though I have no problem giving advice to others and telling people, it's okay, guys. Who cares? My first gut reaction when I realized it was at work was, what if they open it and read what those medications are? It is one thing for them and I to casually discuss or even discuss in passing, but the idea in my brain of them seeing written down on paper with no questions, Surra takes these medications for these parts of her anxiety, whatever, gave me anxiety. And I literally had to look at myself in the mirror and be like, who cares? What does it matter? You've been working for these people at that point. It was like 3 years in. I'm like, and you provide the highest level of care in every capacity for this family. So who cares if they know that I take Ritalin for ADHD? That Ritalin helps fuel me to keep my brain clear and to show up and be the best nanny for them possible. It's interesting how, like I said, we can give that advice to others, we can know it in ourselves and still feel that inherent pull of, oh dear, someone's gonna know. And, sometimes things like that have to happen for us to be like, who cares? And then the other thing that you said that resonated with me is that I don't find our mental health struggles to be a detriment. I joke all the time that ADHD is my superpower. ADHD, like I said just now, is what helps fuel me to be the best human, the best nanny. I am constantly overthinking. So instead of looking at that as something that, is going to be a detriment to me as a human or as a professional, you flip that switch. That is no longer something that pulls you down. That is something that you are able to do better because you are thinking 8 steps ahead, right? You are counting that back. If I need to be somewhere by 4 p.m., that means I need to wake the kids up by 3:30 p.m. That means I need to be finishing cleaning up this task by 2:35 p.m. That means I need to be done prepping dinner by 2 p.m. Every single thing is laid out. We are on top of our you know what. Okay. So if anyone ever wants to tell someone that your anxiety, your ADHD, whatever you might personally be struggling with is going to make you less than, you tell them that's not true.
Amen. Amen. And to your point about medication versus the casual conversation, I just want to invite folks to consider those of us who casually joke about mental health and say that we struggle with XYZ and have not seen someone and have not figured out, is there a way I can help myself? Is there a medication I can have? Are probably not doing as well as those of us who have gone somewhere, who have talked to someone, who have gotten a diagnosis, who have gotten a medication. Because if you're on medication, you're regulated, ideally. Whereas, others of us are out here raw dogging life and hoping that the fruits and vegetables we consume might balance us out,
Nope.
So
And, it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. Like getting like really personal for a second, I remember when I begged doctors for a diagnosis for a very long time. Like I guess we're going to get like into a little bit more of like that side of mental health because it affects women more than men, and as we know, women definitely make up the predominant percentage of our field. Women are consistently ignored by doctors, especially when it comes to women's health and mental health. And as we've seen a huge trend, I don't mean trend like bad, trend as in literally trending upwards, an increase of diagnoses for women in mental health, specifically ADHD and generalized anxiety, in their late 20s to early 40s are now being diagnosed. And that is because we were all ignored when we were children. Nobody looked at the little girl in the room who needed to be the center of attention, who always had to raise her hand to know the answer, who was looked at as bossy or the know it all or all of those things, you know? They were looking for the kids who were literally bouncing off the walls and couldn't sit in their chairs. So I digress. I fought for years through all of my 20s and early 30s with multiple doctors to get a diagnosis for ADHD and PMDD. Finally, at 30, 34, I guess it was, or 35, whatever it was, finally got diagnosed. And the doctor looked at me, and I remember just breaking into tears because the doctor, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, said something along the lines of, I don't know how you've been able to manage the success that you have with the level of ADHD that you have. And I looked at her and I'm like, so, like, it's really not supposed to be this hard every day just to be a person? And I'm like, I've literally been living for 3 decades, fighting out here for my life every day just to present to everyone like normal, right? And so imagine like, and someone like me who I don't know, this might sound narcissistic, but like I'm confident, I'm outgoing, like I have no problem putting myself out there, right? So if that's what I am going through, can you imagine what someone who does not feel comfortable talking about this and going out there and finding solutions for themselves is going through for decades, fighting for people to be in their corner, fighting for doctors to listen and to say, I hear you. I believe you. I'm going to help you. So, yes, people, like, I'm sorry if people have not listened to you in the past. But like Amber said, it is okay to ask for help and it is okay to fight for yourself to find doctors and caregivers who will listen to you and say, I hear you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what a better advocate does that make for the children that we care for? These kids are growing up with social media and screen time like unlimited a lot of the time. They're growing up with a lot of pressure for extracurriculars, for academic achievement, and someone has to be sensitive to how that may affect them. A lot of times parents are so busy, working hard, providing, raising their children. As I don't know if you've seen, Sarah's been talking about the idea of raising your children when you have support and all that stuff, but they're thinking of big picture, the larger themes, whereas we're there in the quiet moments with these kids and we're hearing them say, I don't really want to do that, I don't really enjoy that, I'm not really comfortable with that. I'm not really good at that. Like, my brain doesn't work that way. And I feel like those of us who are not as afraid of talking about mental health topics and things like that are such better advocates for these kids, such better listeners to these kids. I feel like I've been able to empower some school age kids to say how they feel, to put words to their emotions and things because I'm a sensitive soul myself.
Yep.
So it really is, like you said, a superpower. And at the end of the day, more people are going through it than are not. So we really got to work on the stigma. And I don't know how we do that. I really don't. I was thinking when we were preparing to talk about this topic, I was thinking like, what are the steps going forward? And it's so hard to identify those because it's just like at the end of the day, some people are comfortable with it, some people are not. And in a way, what we do is selling ourselves to these families, but we're selling them without knowing what they're looking for necessarily, right? Because the job ads are going to say organized, they're going to say flexible, they're going to say, the buzzwords, but they're not going to say who this family truly is at their core. Because again, it's illegal, it's taboo to talk about, your mental health diagnoses or anything like that. So it's like we're in this place where we're trying to sell ourselves to these families. And we're like, I don't know what I can say. I don't know how open I can be. So I just want to acknowledge that I get that that's a thing. And I'm not asking you to write on your CV all what's going on with you. We're just kind of talking through how we function through these jobs and assignments, considering our own mental health. So I want to talk about circumstances that can affect our mental health on the clock.
Now I know
Bec-
why you were chuckling because there's a million things that could make my brain start feeling like this
and even
while on the
listen,
job.
even if you feel like, you know what, my brain is regular, degular, It's not spicy at all. I don't struggle at all. Working as a
There's
nanny.
still going to be, if you work with kids, okay, you don't have to have mental health to want to go mental at some point during the day. That should be on like a bumper sticker. I don't have mental health, but I went mental today.
Preach. No, absolutely. And I feel like it's so funny because in either the last episode or the one before that, y'all, I don't know, my brain, I'm editing them all. So, anyway, recently when I spoke to Jess Gabor of the Bambini
Love
Collective,
her.
yeah, she's so dope. And she was talking about two things. She was talking about the emotional traffic that we navigate through all day long, but she also was talking about the one-sided nature of being a nanny, where we give and we give and we give, we pour and we pour and we pour. But at the end of the day, depending on the family, we could be completely invisible. We're like the
Oof.
ghost of the day past, you know? So it's like you show up, and again, this is depending on your family, but you show up to work, they
Everyone's
say,
had one of those families. Everyone's had
yeah.
that family at some point in their career.
Yeah, especially as kids get older, right? So if you don't have to do a handoff, if the child is not a baby and you're not necessarily being handed a child, some days, like I've had jobs where I would walk in and the kids would just float downstairs to greet me, where the parents would finish getting dressed and just go to work, you know?
Wait, like they wouldn't even say good morning to you?
I mean, they would say good morning, but it wasn't like, hi, how are you? Are you?
Really? That's just basic courtesy,
Yeah.
y'all. Like
Well,
in any industry, who's raising those people? Okay, this is why I'm so glad that there are people like you and me and the rest of our industry, okay? Because someone needs to be raising humans to just have at least the basic level of courtesy. And I'm sorry, if someone's coming into your home to care for the most important thing in your life, I think it's pretty darn easy and acceptable to just say, "Good morning, Amber. How are you today?" Or, "Hey, Amber, I'm off to work. Have a great day." Like, even just that, it could literally just be, "I'm out the door. Have a good one." Come on,
yeah,
y'all.
I think all my jobs start off that way, I will say. But the more comfortable families get, the more they trust that like Amber's got this. Girl, so there have been seasons where I have not seen my bosses for like 2 weeks straight because the kids just either I'm picking them up from somewhere like a camp or school or something like that, so we
Yep,
don't have that interaction. And a lot, if their activities go until basically it's time for me to go home, I'm
yep,
dropping them off and I'm going home. You know what I mean? And the job that I've been working for the past, I think it's been like 10 months, my bosses work from home. And mom boss will, when I come in the morning, she's like, "How are you?" And when I would give a short, like, "I'm great," she would be like, "So what did you do last night? What did you do this morning?" She would ask more questions because she's like, "That's not how you answer that question." She really wanted to know how I was doing.
yeah.
And the more she did that, like, because this every single day, I was like, I would text my nanny friends and be like, "This lady really cares how I'm doing." Like, when is it gonna stop? It hasn't stopped yet.
I love that for
But
you.
I also work for someone who manages other people. And so, like you said, human decency, it's just part of the person she is, but also the way she shows up at her job. So the way that she shows up at her job as my boss as well, if that makes sense. I think a lot of families, once they get comfortable, they're like, "You've got this." And that's a greater conversation about mental health in general in our society because, and this is going to be a little soapboxy,
Okay.
but people tend to take on so much more than they can manage with wishful thinking as, the
Always.
motivation, right? So it's like, yes, I have children. Yes, I am married. Yes, I have a demanding career. I also am going to be in this social club. I also am going to sign up to be a room parent. I also am going to make sure we vacation 4 times a year for family fun. I also am going to make sure I show up and volunteer at the church. I'm also going to make, you know what I mean? And so what happens to us as domestic employees is it's like when they get to a point where they're
We
like,
take on that role.
yeah, when they get
We
to a
take on
point
those extra projects.
where they're like, "You can handle this," they're like, "All right," because they've taken on so much more than they can manage themselves. I'm sure their mental health, those who do that, is not in the best place either. But that's how we become invisible. It's kind of like, the sun. As long as it rises every morning, no one's thinking about what's happening overnight, right? As long as it comes back
1000%.
out in the morning. But if it doesn't come out, then it's like, now
Really
what?
like that analogy. I
Yeah.
love that analogy. But I think, it still comes back to us having to be our own best advocate, right? Because we don't have a human resources department as nannies. The only people we have to discuss our job responsibilities, the day to day interactions with, are the employers. While everyone might not feel comfortable being able to do so, I think it is important to get to a place where you can be your own advocate. And not everyone might want that level of communication between us and our employers. I think that's also important to note that everyone's going to want a different dynamic between their employers and themselves. But like I'm with you, I want to have more of an interaction. I like being able to be integrated like that. I think one of the biggest, I hate the word blessings because I feel like it's so overused, but I can't think of anything else. So, one of the biggest blessings of being in this industry is truly being integrated in that family dynamic. And I'm not saying that we are part of the family. I'm actually not that nanny who buys into that line of thought. I'm not your family because at the end of the day, it is you are paying me for a service. And the moment that doesn't work for them anymore, we're not family, right? So I don't like to say I'm part of the family, but I like to say I want to be treated like family and I like to be integrated in that family. And with that comes the need to be able to speak up for yourself. And I actually had a similar situation with my current family, which come this fall will be going into year 6. Wow, that's crazy to think. Or is it year 5? I don't know. The time is flying, flying in the best way possible. I could not love them more than anything. But after 5 or 6 years, we've obviously rode this roller coaster up and down between some highs and lows of learning how to navigate together and what that looks like. And there was a point where I had to be like literally speaking up, be like, hey, like I do not feel recognized here for what I am providing. Because they, at one point during our yearly negotiations to amend my contract, said something that basically insinuated that, like, well, what are you doing to deserve this big of a raise? And I kid you not, girl, in the middle of this sit down in person, I had to take the deepest breath. And I'm not going to lie, we definitely had some intense tones of voice that night because I said something like, how dare you say that you don't see or understand what I could be doing. Speaking only for myself, I am not just the nanny. I am their nanny, their household manager. I am in charge of some really important things in these children's lives who have special needs, who have things that I have helped observe to get diagnosed. Like there is a very long list of things that deserve that. And for them to say something like that, I don't think they even understood the gravity, right, of what they were saying. And I think that's the bigger picture, like you said, with the sun rising and setting. People, our employers don't truly see everything that we're doing, taking it all the way back to what you said of they are looking at the bigger picture of where their kids are going to be in a year and 5 years and how to set them up for the success. We are there for the everyday successes. We are there for the everyday struggles and the day in and day out of raising a child. And those are the things that are so easily overlooked because you don't see what I do for 11 hours during the day. You just see that you come home, you see a craft on the wall, maybe, you see a sensory bin put away, you see your house is cleaned up, and your child is fed and happy. But you don't see the 45 minutes it took to set up that sensory bin. You don't see that I was crying in the pantry eating double stuffed Oreos because the sensory bin that we just spent 5 minutes on took 45 minutes to set up, and the kid threw the sand because they had a meltdown. And we had to have a 15-minute talk on how to bring the meltdown down. And then we had to do this, and we had to do like, there's everything. And I think the only person who truly understands it, honestly, is the stay at home mom. And I am not comparing a nanny to a mom. Let's just make that very clear. However, the role in the day to day existence of what is being done, I don't know if anyone else outside of our industry could get it except that stay at home mom, because she is also so poorly overlooked in what she is doing every day in the same way. Everything goes on. 11 hours? You have no idea what happens in 11 hours. We deserve every penny of that because, we also bring it home. And then when we get home, we have our own life to keep working on. That load, that emotional burden, that mental burden does not end. We spend 8 to 10 to 12, whatever hours it is a day, taking care of someone else's home, someone else's children, and someone else's life and everything. Then we get off work. It's not done. That whole cycle then starts over. We go home and we take care of our home, our families, our kids, our pets, our struggles. And how much time do we have to do that, right? I get off work. By the time I get off work, right? Let's say I want to go to the gym. Okay, cool. So I get off work at 5:30. I go to the gym from 6 to 7. I get home at 7:30. I have to walk my dog. I have to eat or cook my dinner. I have what now, maybe 2 hours left before I need to go to bed and do it all over again. Is it any wonder why so many people, so many women, first and foremost, regardless of what industry you're in, use those 2 hours for who knows what and have nothing left for ourselves because we are the ones that are carrying every piece of that puzzle.
You preaching today, friend.
I'm sorry. I am sorry. I didn't mean to just whoop. But yeah, that is
No,
that is a
don't be
soapbox. You want to
sorry.
start a soapbox? That is one I can get on. The cycle never ends. And even if they're fortunate enough to have a partner that carries 50 or even more percent of that load, it is still on our shoulders. It never goes away. It is in our brains all the time. How can we help someone else? I feel like us in this industry, we are all inherent nurturers and caregivers, right? You don't end up in this role if you're not. So I know that you're going to say you think the same way. My nanny brain never turned off. Never. Right. Like, I'm not sitting here thinking about the kiddos 24/7, but there's thoughts about them quite often when I'm not at work. I wonder what they're doing right now. Oh, hey, I see that in the store. The 3-year-old would love that. Ooh, that could make a fun craft. Ooh, 3 weeks from now, we have to do this. Like it's always in our brain. And then we have our own mental health that we need to think about.
I think it's so interesting what you said about stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home parents, I guess we should say.
Sorry to the fathers
And
and
no, you're fine.
uh, primary providers.
Primary parents. I think especially stay-at-home parents who don't have full-time support. I know a lot of nannies prefer to work with those parents. Like if it's babysitting, if it's a short-term gig, working with a stay-at-home parent who has been the primary caregiver and sole caregiver, they will treat you like royalty because they fully get what it means to be there for every little minute. They get the challenge of trying to create something tangible, right? Like you said, you see the craft, you see the sensory bin. You're trying to create something tangible to represent progress, to represent accomplishment, to represent that we actually did something today, but we really did a million and one other things that are not as tangible, that are not necessarily visible, and that parents don't necessarily know to ask about or think about. And I think part of my problem, we'll just talk about me for a moment, is I thrive, or I used to thrive. I'm trying to get out of this. I used to thrive on the magic of making it happen without speaking to what it took. And I feel like I almost created this unsustainable standard of making it look easy. Because when you make it look easy consistently, then people assume it is easy for you. And so then they're like, well, you handled this, let me throw this at you. Now this is a new challenge. And you're like, hey, I'm already hanging by a thread. But if you didn't tell them this is actually a challenge for me, adding this to my plate is actually taking me beyond capacity. So I need to take something else off my plate. If you don't have those moments of vulnerability, which I get can be scary with certain families because people have ripped me apart for being honest. But
Yep.
as long as you maintain this, I'm going to make it look easy. I'm going to make the magic. They're going to come home and it's going to be perfect. No one can appreciate how much it took for you to do that. So like you were saying before, you're your best advocate, even if you just mention we had about 16 meltdowns, but we got it done. Or even if you mention we had to take a little space from each other, but we figured it out. Because then it demonstrates, hey, I'm a human. I'm not a robot. I struggle like you struggle, you know? I've been doing this for longer and I've got systems in place that maybe you don't necessarily utilize, but it's still hard. It's still work. I've told the story before about the mom who I I worked with her child before her child was diagnosed with a disability, and we had a tough day, and I shared with this mom when she got home that we had a really tough moment that day where we both ended up crying, me and the toddler. And the mom said to me, "Why would you cry? Why would you be emotional? What did my kid do that was so bad that you cried?" And I was like,
Could you not? Those moments can be so stressful and overwhelming for everyone. And obviously, without knowing the specific situation that you were in, even if it's just that emotional break for, the caregiver of watching the child struggle, it is very hard to be in those moments sometimes. And it's hard to regulate and bring that down. And so, I think that's amazing that you said something. And so what did you respond to the mom when she said, like, really, why did you cry? What did you say to her?
well, I explained that I cried because I felt powerless to fix the situation, to make this child feel okay and balanced and grounded. And I also felt overwhelmed with the task of getting through the day regardless of how the child felt, which really was the challenge. The challenge was we had to go somewhere, and this child was like, I don't want to. And again, this is before being diagnosed with a disability, but I could see that this was not our typical, we don't want to go. This was,
Right.
I
More.
cannot, you know? And so I was juggling I got to get it done because that's my job. And someone asked me to get it done. If I were your parent, we would just stay home. And the truth is, this is a parent who cried to me weekly for months leading up to this. And I think that's the part where I was like, when she said, why would you cry? I was like, now, wasn't you just crying last night? And it goes back to making it look easy and forgetting that your nanny is a person because it's like, why do you get to cry and I can't?
It's
Especially if I'm not
hard.
burdening you with my feelings in the moment. It's not like I called you at 12 when it was happening and said, I can't do this. Come get your child. We got through it. We were way over the hump. I was just being honest with you. So I don't know why I brought that up. Nannies are people too, I guess is the bigger point.
Just like a little thing on that before I forget. I also think it's important to let our kids see our almost full range of emotions. Like,
Yes.
obviously, don't have a mentee be in front of the 3-year-old. If you're really getting to that point, that's like I said, where I maybe go hide in the pantry or whatever you use for your crying closet. Everyone should have a crying closet or crying corner. If you don't, or if you don't know what it is, it's literally somewhere that as a parent or nanny or type of child caregiver, you can go alone and scream and cry and eat Oreos or Swiss rolls or whatever, your guilty pleasure is and get all of those feelings out. Okay, so outside of those mentee be moments, I think it's important for our charges and for people's children to see that we have a full range of emotions just like they are. I was recently talking about this on either my TikTok or my Instagram that, children have really big feelings. Children have really big feelings. Sorry. If we as adults struggle to regulate our emotions at 20, at 30, at 40, at whatever age we are, if we struggle to regulate our emotions, what makes people think that these tiny humans who have no idea about the world that they can do it on their own, let alone at all? They cannot. One of my favorite holy grail phrases in education, in the early childhood and caregiving spaces: my children are not giving me a hard time. My children are having
Having
a
a
hard
hard
time.
time.
And when you think about it from that perspective, I think it really helps reframe an entire situation. And like bringing it back to crying in front of the kids, they need to know that we feel just like they do, even in the, really struggle moments, like where maybe you lost your cool and raised your voice too much at a child, or was short with them when they didn't necessarily deserve that. Nannies are humans too. We are not just built in a way that, we're robots. I do not yell at children. I do not ever step out of line. Like, no, I'm a human too. Just because I went to college for this and I taught for this and I've been doing this forever, I'm a human too. Sometimes I lose my cool at the kids. Do I scream, rant, and rave? No, but sometimes I behave in a way that is not how I like to present myself to the child. And it's okay in those moments. And it's also important and okay to then be like, I'm really sorry. I got frustrated. They need to hear those words verbalized. We are the advocate for their emotional coaching. They don't come built in to know what anger, sadness, frustration, disappointment, happiness, they don't know inherently built in what those are and how to process them. So when we struggle and then name it for them, not only are we giving them what unfortunately a lot of us didn't growing up as kids, right? Like my parents were great, but I don't think I remember them very often saying, I'm sorry I yelled at you, or, I shouldn't have said that. That's our role now to impart on these kids that sometimes adults also get sad and frustrated. And it's okay to say, your behavior was frustrating me, but I should not have yelled at you. And I am sorry. They call me Ai. That means auntie. It's a Chinese term of endearment. And, literally just the other day, I remember saying, like, I am very sorry. Your behavior was frustrating me, but I should not have yelled at you. Right. My behavior is not related to their behavior. And it's important for them to know that sometimes we're going to react, but it is not their fault. And to not only recognize that, to then give them the tools and the words to say, it sounded though like you were really frustrated too. What was going on? Let's talk about that. And if they're really young, you have to literally coach them through every part of it. I'm very sorry. I should not have raised my voice. It sounded though like you were really frustrated and I got frustrated too. Were you frustrated because you wanted the green cup and I gave you the blue cup? That does sound really hard. We can, and like we have to walk through every little step. We're all going to have those feelings. It's okay for kids to see yours too.
It goes back to the principle of modeling humanity in general. We are a
That's
constant
a good way to
model
put it. Yes.
for children. Our very existence is demonstrating to them a lot of what the human experience is. And like you said, if we're perfect all the time, they're going to think that when they have moments and meltdowns that they're not up to par, that they're not functioning the way that they should as a human being. But when we have those very transparent moments where we lose it a little bit and we take the time to talk to them about it, it not only demonstrates to them, I'm human in the way that you're human, but here's a good way to handle it, or here is how
Yeah.
we go back and apologize or identify what happened there and try to repair a circumstance.
Nanny's life, this is my life, y'all. But steady. You see this nanny life.